For the people who are watching this in the chamber, I'd like you to know what I'm actually trying to achieve here is to move that the following matter be referred to the Community Affairs References Committee for inquiry and report by the 4th of September 2023. Treatment options for children and young people with gender dysphoria in Australia, with particular reference to A. Whether children are being rushed into gender reassignment treatment, as has been suggested by University of Queensland Law Professor Patrick Parkinson. B. Whether psychiatrists such as Dr Julian Spencer, a senior staff specialist in the Queensland Children's Hospital's Consultation Liaison Psychiatry team, who question the use of puberty blockers without an appropriate mental health assessment, are being silenced. C. Whether children are being overdiagnosed with gender dysphoria without proper consultation or mental health assessment. D. Whether Australia should follow the United Kingdom and many European countries in adopting a more cautious approach to the prescription of puberty-blocking drugs amid concerns the evidence base for their efficiency is lacking. E. Whether the Commonwealth should take a greater oversight and regulatory role in the prescription of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to children following the admission from the federal government that it has no idea how widely the drugs are being prescribed off-label for gender dysphoria and if any other related matters. And I hope that the Senate will listen to what I have to say, and including all those people who have contacted our officers to tell us of the growing concern they have. There is a growing chorus of experts in Australia are speaking out against it, at great risk to their jobs and reputation, and are revealing the harm it causes to children. A growing number of Australian parents are feeling completely powerless against it. A growing chorus of experts overseas are warning of its consequences. Countries held by the Australian left to be progressive, like Sweden and Finland, are restricting it. After a broad inquiry which found little evidence supporting it, the United Kingdom has virtually stopped it. The rapid increase in Australian children being prescribed puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to treat gender dysphoria deserves a comprehensive inquiry by this parliament. Last year, a Freedom of Information request revealed the alarming increase in this phenomenon. It revealed a tenfold increase in Australian children enrolled in public adolescent gender clinics from 2014 to 2021. It revealed more than a sevenfold increase in adolescents receiving cross-sex hormone treatments over the same period. And of greatest concern, it revealed a more than 100-fold increase in children being prescribed puberty blockers. These were just the public figures. The numbers are certainly much higher when children being treated by GPs and private clinics are included. This controversy has been raised recently by Queensland paediatrician Dr Diane Wilson, who has called for an immediate halt to these treatments by the Queensland Children's Gender Service. He's called for an immediate investigation into the process of diagnosis and treatment at the clinic. In a letter to the Chief Executive of Children's Health Queensland, Dr Wilson noted the evolution of the treatment of gender-questioning children over the last 3 years has been exponential. He said that despite these developments, the service continues to operate in the same manner it has always done, with little or no regard for the evolution of information in the area of clinical practice. He said that in doing so, the service was conducting poor quality medicine, lacking evidence base that is causing harm to children. Just sit back and absorb that for a moment. A leading paediatrician is saying these treatments are harming children. This man is not an idealist, a politician, or a media commentator. He is an expert on children's health. He has said, and I quote, "There is no evidence of benefit for the use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for gender-questioning children, and there never has been." The Queensland Children's Gender Service has almost 1,000 kids on its books and has the nation's highest rates of cross-sex hormone prescriptions. These are being given to children as young as 14 despite inclusive clinical evidence they cause permanent long-term health impacts, such as osteoporosis, impaired fertility and sexual function, negative impacts on brain development, and increased risks of hypertension, cardiovascular disease, obesity, high cholesterol and diabetes. I also refer to an article published this month in the Australian newspaper by Professor Patrick Parkinson. Professor Parkinson is an emeritus professor of law at the University of Queensland and former chair of the Family Law Council. He has called this rapid rise of so-called gender-affirming care a public health crisis caused not by a disease but by a social contagion. He noted that anyone who raises concern about this issue is shouted down and vilified. He's absolutely right, because that's exactly what happened to me when I raised this matter in the Senate last year. He notes that it's true a very small number of people genuinely suffer gender dysphoria, which is resolved only with cross-sex hormones and risky surgery. He also noted that this fact has been seized and used to build an intricate web of lies and falsehoods, such as the disproven notion that there are more than two genders, that it's possible to change sex or be non-binary, and that every child has an innate gender identity that awaits discovery. It is this web of lies that effectively forms the basis for the so-called gender affirmation approach that is followed by children's gender clinics across Australia. It's nonsense, and it's not supported by the scientific or clinical evidence. Professor Parkinson also noted that politicians have embraced this new faith without evidence. So have I. The usual suspects in Labor, the Greens and the Coalition proved that last year in rejecting my motion for an inquiry. Not all the Coalition. There were some that have common sense and did support my motion. But it was all the Labor and the Greens and some of the crossbench as well, to name Senator David Pocock as one. Politicians in this country have actually passed laws supporting this new faith, effectively criminalising any other approach to supporting vulnerable children and even preventing parents from trying to help their own children in other ways. As the professor pointed out, fashionable but unsupported ideas about gender don't really matter if they do no harm. But this is causing harm. Children are being harmed and families are being torn apart. Earlier this year, I met some mothers who had gone through this with their children. It's been a wrenching, traumatic process for all of them. They've seen their children influenced by teachers, their peers, social media, into believing all their problems will be solved by switching genders. This gender affirmation ideology has all the hallmarks of a crazy cult, capturing impressionable minds, isolating them from their families and ultimately destroying their lives. One mother's tale bears repeating. She took her young teenage daughter's gender questioning very seriously and sought all the psychiatric and psychological help she could. These experts couldn't compete with the indoctrination this poor girl was getting in her classes, in the schoolyard and on the internet. The girl, aged only 14, decided she was a boy trapped in a girl's body and demanded gender-affirming treatment. Her mother did all the research she could, consulting with the same experts she asked to help her daughter. Life at home became unbearable as her daughter grew increasingly estranged as she underwent appalling changes to her body thanks to cross-sex hormones. Now 21, this young woman has completed her transition, although she was bound to a lifetime of cross-sex hormone treatments. And she is bitterly unhappy. She is now so depressed about how she looks, she only leaves her home a few times a year, deeply disguised. Her family has been torn apart. And I ask you, How was she any different from the generations of Australian teenagers who have been depressed or confused as they enter puberty? How was she any different from them in seeking the approval of her peers and society at large, from seeking the attention of all teenagers need as they approach the dawning prospect of adulthood? She wasn't. The difference was she's part of a generation that has been used to push a political agenda that is supported and promoted by many senators in this chamber. As Professor Parkinson and Dr Wilson have said, this issue deserves the closest public scrutiny. They have been joined by no less than the National Association of Practising Psychiatrists in calling for an inquiry. Families which have been caused to suffer this cult deserve the opportunity to tell their stories. If you oppose this, you are a science denier. If you oppose this, you are deliberately ignoring experts who know a great deal more about it than you do. If you oppose this, you are telling these Australian families you don't care about their trauma. You will be telling these families you don't care about their children. You will be telling these families you care more about political agenda than the well-being of the most vulnerable people in our Australian society. I ask, what are you afraid of? What is the problem? Are you afraid of the evidence that will emerge to expose this cult for what it is? You're afraid you will be exposed as complicit in the experimentation which has been proven to destroy lives. Mark my words, if you deny this inquiry, you will not escape accountability, because the Australian people are actually demanding answers to this, as those mothers who walked the halls of this Parliament House at the end of last year, and when they came to me and I said, what reaction do you have? Great reaction from the senators. They are all in support of a Senate inquiry. This is not a bill. This is not a bill, this is a Senate inquiry to give these people the opportunity to have their say, to tell us what is actually happening out there with their children. You're not asking me the questions, I'm just putting forward on behalf of the people that I represent that they want to have a voice. They want to be able to put their stories across. Their children's lives have been destroyed. They've lost control over their children, and you will not give them this. Labor voted against it last time, and the Greens fully voted against this as well, and so did some of the crossbench. Oh yes, and your comment, Senator McKim, is exactly the same, and you're going to do exactly the same again. Pushing your own agenda. You don't care about the children of this nation, you don't care about the families, and these people who want to actually have a voice and a say. There is no problem about having an investigation. If you might have your own issues, no one's saying to you you don't have to stop your children from having puberty blockers and all the rest of it, but give the parents an opportunity to have their say and say the impact it's had on their lives. Yeah. There is nothing wrong with that, is giving this people to have a say in this. Your interruption is just, it appalls me that you do not understand. You're not here to be a voice for the people of this nation who are crying out for something to be done about this. They want to be heard. That's all they want. Just give them the opportunity to have this Senate inquiry so they can actually be heard. Then make up your mind. Let the report come down and then put it to the whole Parliament. There's nothing wrong with asking for that. And on behalf of these people of Australia who are calling us to do this, they are, the whole of the country, the way it's going with this woke, it is just ridiculous the way we're going. And many people ring me up and say, what the hell is happening? Is it in the water in the bubble in Canberra? What is on the minds of these politicians that they can't understand what is happening out here in our communities, to our children, in our schools, and what we teach the kids, what we're telling the young ones, all the rest of it? Keep your LGBTIQ to yourself behind your own bloody closed doors. Leave the children alone. They do not have a right to be put your sense of what you want to say through the teachers and everyone. Leave the children alone. This is to do in their own homes, not for you pushing your own agenda on innocent children's minds of what they should be, or whether you're a girl or a boy. I've never heard of anything so disgusting all my life, what is happening in our school system now to our young, innocent children. So I call on the chamber, please consider this motion. It's not a bill, it's about giving the people of Australia the opportunity to have their say.
Thank you, Senator Hanson.